everyone and welcome once again to our channel. I hope you're enjoying our videos, and this time we're going to be talking about something which is very interesting and intrinsic to instructional design. We're going to talk about Gestalt, the laws of Gestalt, and the art of instructional design. Now, Gestalt, loosely translated into English, means shape or form. And it means that the whole picture, if you're looking at a full picture, it's much bigger than the sum of its parts. Now that sounds a little odd maybe, but this phrase is often used when we are explaining Gestaltic principles. Let's look at what it means. I'm going to start with a couple of examples. How many of you can see this lady? I'm sure everybody can. And how many of you can see the flower? I'm sure all of you can see the flower also, right? Let's look at another picture. How many of you can see horses in this picture? Two horses charging and birds flying. How many of you can see the lady in the picture? Well, this is Gestalt. The whole mystery of Gestalt is how your brain actually interprets information which is loosely put together as a visual game almost. Now, when we're trying to design information to present to our class, we have to be very careful that we can actually design it in a way that it becomes instinctive to us to learn it. How many times have we gone to a class and come back feeling absolutely vague or not at all clear about what was taught? It happens all the time, and that's because the way your brain is perceiving the information is not as the designer or the trainer had originally planned. When we are designing, it's very, very important to make sure that these gaps or these perceptions do not occur or do not happen in the wrong way. So to get over this problem, we have to look at it from 5 principles. The first principle being figure ground principle, the second, the principle of conjuity, the third, the principle of closure, fourth, the principle of proximity, and the last is similarity. So let's understand what is the figure ground principle. Now, the elements that are perceived as either figures, distinct elements of focus, or ground, the background or landscape on which the figures rest. Now, I know that really sounds very, very complicated. Let's understand it with an example. So how many of you can see the face of a lady? You know, when you focus on the white part, it becomes the face. And how many of you can see the hand sticking out, almost as if somebody is explaining something to someone? Well, one part becomes the background. If I'm focusing on the hand, then the white part becomes the background. If I'm focusing on the black part, the face becomes the background. So as I said, elements, these are different elements which are perceived as either ground, which is the background, or what is in front, which is the foreground. We have other pictures like this. This is one of the most famous ones, right? From one side, if you look, you can see a vase, and from another side, you can see 2 faces. Now, how does this apply to instructional design? How does it link up to learning in the classroom? Well, let's start with an exercise. How do we teach a child to draw a circle? Just imagine, think of a child who, maybe it could be your child, and the child has now gone to school. For the first time, they are teaching him or her how to draw a circle. How do you think they do it? Right? Well, normally, you cannot ask a child to draw a circle because a child has no clue what a circle is. So what do they do instead? They ask you to draw the moon, or they get a bowl and they ask you to draw a bowl, which means you're asking the child to refer to something which they are already familiar with. So the background of the child is something which they're very familiar with in this case. What you want to teach them is the basics of geometry, maybe shapes. So there is a foreground is what the child is already familiar with. If I want to teach something to anyone, I have to go to the point what the person is already familiar with and then introduce a new concept. Let's take another example. How do we use this principle when we are designing an induction program in our office? What is it that you want to teach a person who's just joined the organization? Rules, regulations. You might want to teach them some meeting etiquette, email etiquette, a lot of things. Because this person could have just passed out of college and come and has absolutely no experience about working in an office. So what is it that you would like them to learn? And how would you make sure that the gap in understanding doesn't come about? Well, a lot of times I've seen in organizations, they miss out on this. You will have a trainer who will come and tell all the rules and regulations, but don't see whether it is making sense or not to the person. So if you're creating a program for people who've just joined as an induction program, it is very important to refer to their experience. Now, what is their experience? It's college life. It could be, home roots. So when we are creating the design, we have to start off by explaining to them exactly or creating that link between their life, their experience, and then come up to the new rules. So you could say, for instance, well, you've been writing letters to your friends. How is it different from writing letters to your colleagues or to your clients? We could talk about rules and regulations. What were the rules that you had in your hostel? Could you come in any time you wanted, or did you have some specific time by which you had to come in? Now, when you start doing that, you're creating a background and a sense of acceptance towards a new learning. So I'm sure you must have understood the whole basic idea of the figure ground principle. Let's see if you can apply it. Let's just imagine that you have to go or you have to design a workshop for a bunch of people in your organization going to the US or going to China, a different country altogether. And you've been asked to design a workshop on cross-cultural sensitivity, right? Happens all the time. Now, when you're designing the workshop, what is it that you will do to ensure that the figure ground principle is being used effectively? Just think about it. This is a regular, proper exercise. Write down exactly what you would do. And I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to make a note of it. Well, I'm sure a lot of you would have got the answer already. The solution is you would most likely ask the participants to talk about their own culture, talk about the oddities of their own culture, and talk about how it has been, their culture has been misunderstood by people from different countries, or different regions of the country, Ask them how they would react to the kind of insensitivity rather, which was displayed to them. How did they feel? Once that was done, you would then introduce the opening slide and tell them, you know what, the objectives of the workshop are this. So you have created a background of their own experience and a foreground about what is it that you're going to teach. So you have created a very healthy mindset, a very accepting mindset of what you want to teach. And this is the perfect example of figure ground principle. Now, so this is the entire set. Let's look at the second part, the law of contiguity. What does it mean? Now, contiguity states that proximity in space and time influences how we perceive the world. This also sounds pretty complicated, but very simply put, if I look at it, how many boxes are there in this picture? Can you see? Are there 3, 4? Can you count? And can you tell me how many are there in this? Well, I'm changing the picture. Can you count and tell me now? Well, the answer is pretty simple. In the first one, if you see, there are obviously 9 because 3 into 3 is equal to 9. And you can almost immediately give the answer because your mind automatically puts it together because they're close to each other. But if I look at the second one, how many squares are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 squares. But you have to do it in a different way. You can't process it. You can't group it and take shortcuts. Now, what does that mean in terms of designing your workshop? What it means is when you structure it well, when you put similar things together as a group, your brain or your participant's brain will be able to remember things, structure it, understand it in a much better way. Now, why is this so important? Why is this part so important for us? Well, the fact is when we start designing our workshops, we are so caught up with our own knowledge, and sometimes we have, the faculty or the designer will have so much of knowledge and they would love to put everything together. They want to overdo the information. And when, as a participant, you just can't process it that fast. So you will miss out a lot of information, right? I'm sure a lot of you would have suffered because of this, because there was an overdose. We say there's a theory overdose. Your brain cannot process that kind of information. If you put information in an unstructured, all over the place way, nothing is going to go into the minds of your participants. Let's look at the third one, the law of closure. Let's look at the law of closure. What does it say? The law says that our brain ignores gaps and fills it up by seeing it as a complete image. Now, what does that mean? Let's look at this picture. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this logo. It's the World Wildlife Fund logo. And you've seen it hundreds of times before. And nobody has a doubt trying to figure out what it is. It's a koala bear, right? Now, how many of you realize that there is no continuity, there's no line which connects the two ears together? So our brain completes it for us so that we can make sense of something which is not there. It's like the brain creates a shortcut for you to understand and look for patterns. Now the pattern is there from before. It will look for all patterns which fit in and complete the picture for you. So the law of closure says that your brain will automatically finish something which is incomplete. So when it comes to instructional design, what does that mean? Now when we have modules which are not connected well, that is part one, the brain starts making incorrect connections. And there's a different understanding of it. So you will have some people who understand and some people who won't understand, and they will complete it in their own head as to what you are trying to say as a designer or as a faculty. So what do you need to do in that case? You need to have the appropriate games, exercises, case studies, so that all the gaps are filled in. That it is filled in exactly the way you want it to be filled in, not what is already there in their heads. When you are designing, you have to be very clear that every detail is worked out from before, and all the examples, the case studies, the group discussions, all the gaps are filled in class. This is what is going to give you the aha moment. If you look at good learning, if you look at any great invention, it doesn't come because somebody went to class and learned it. The aha moment came because they managed to connect things which were not taught but completed in their own minds. That happens only when there is enough interaction, there's enough of ideas being thrown around, etc. The next thing we look at is the law of proximity. What does the word proximity mean? Proximity means closeness. What is close to each other will be remembered together, you can say, or will be linked automatically in the mind of your participant. So let's look at this as an example. I'm sure a lot of you would have already identified what this is. First is the color red. The second is that they are bottles and it's all shaped like a smile. All the bottles are together. So your grouping is that when they're all put together, the red color is which brand? I'm sure a lot of you would identify. It is Coca-Cola. So in your mind, you have already put that idea that it's Coca-Cola. You're showing smiles and you're showing the bottles which are so close to each other. Right? So automatically, it's almost all the neurons related to the color, to the closeness of the bottles, the shape of the bottle and the smile will start firing together. And people will start connecting happiness with Coca-Cola. Let's look at the second logo that we have here. It's of Unilever. And you can see the U. Now, if you see what is there within the U, the shape, it's all the products that Unilever makes. You can see it individually, you can see it as a group, but it's every product which Unilever makes. It's become part of the logo. Now, what are they doing? What are they trying to show, or what are they trying to teach the people who use the brand? That we have so many different products. The moment you see that particular logo, you're going to think of how big Unilever is. So you can see it, as I said, as an individual product. You can see the individual products and you can also see the complete U which is there. And you're linking it very close to the logo which is put at the bottom. So whenever we are trying to create a design, what is it that we need to do? We have to make sure that all the things which are connected to each other are linked and put in the same module. Let's look at it. Now this is a workshop for, let's say it's an assessment center workshop. So if I just look at one slide, I can make out exactly what is going to be covered. And there are two modules. What is an assessment? The history, then you have steps in, what are the steps of the assessment center, what are the uses of the assessment center, and that is all coming under the assessment center overview. In the second set, we are talking about how do we map competency, and all the steps within that are clubbed together. Now, it becomes so much easier for a brain to process that kind of information. There are only 2 points actually. But in those 2 points, we have those sub-points which are linked together and which will help people understand exactly what is supposed to be put. Now let's look at the last one in this, which is the law of similarity. This is not very different. It is similar in a way, but it's still a very important thing. Items that are perceived as similar are grouped together, naturally. Now if I look at this particular visual, if you see, we have a parallelogram and you have a rectangle, right? Now if I was to teach someone parallelogram, what do I have to teach first? Just think about it. If I have to teach a parallelogram, I cannot do it without teaching them what a rectangle looks like. It is a natural flow of the design. So similar things will have to be taught together so that the brain can process all of them, group them together and club them together so that people learn it in a much better way. So with this we are coming to the end of this video. the chief takeaways that we have are: what do you do when you're designing a workshop? What are the questions that you need to ask yourself? First, how will my design be perceived by the learner? You have to think about it. And when I say how will my design be perceived by the learner, I have to go into the mind of the learner and find out. I cannot be teaching a person with 2 years of experience in the same way as I would be teaching that subject to a person with 10 years of experience. So I have to club them, or I have to find commonalities. I have to go to the mind of the person and find out how will this person perceive my teaching. Within the design, how are the similar objects grouped? Is the grouping correct, or are they scattered all over the place? Is the ground, the basis of whatever you're teaching, giving a message, something that will bring about some amount of richness to the design? Or is it just nice to have? Will symmetry on screen lead the learner to group objects that are actually supposed to be logically apart? The way you design it, your slides, if you're doing an e-learning program, you have to look for the symmetry, the way you design it, the way you make it look, so that the eyes and the brain can actually group them in a more structured way, in a very logical, sequential way. So with that, we come to the end of this learning bite, and please like our video and subscribe to our channel. See you soon. Thank you.